Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Grey Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Andres Asano, and today's the 20th of January, 2022. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So, I put out this very simple tweet today while I was thinking through a few different things, and the tweet basically just read, Ethereum is the metaverse. Now, obviously, you guys have heard a lot about the metaverse lately, people trying to bring their own definition to it. Obviously there are very big billion-dollar companies kind of making their moves into the metaverse. We had Facebook rebrand to Meta, and I spoke a bit about this yesterday. But what I wanted to focus on was really what I said here about kind of like Ethereum being the metaverse, or Ethereum is the metaverse, because when you really break it down, what people are hoping that the metaverse is going to be like a shared virtual world, right? Where we can put on some virtual reality glasses or augmented reality glasses, and we can have like a shared world that we can all interact with. Well, isn't that exactly what Ethereum is? It just without the kind of like visual aspect. I mean, the most visual you'll get is going to something like Etherscan and exploring the blockchain and all that sorts of stuff. But when you really break it down, the Ethereum blockchain is a ledger. It's a shared state that we all kind of like can view, and obviously as a blockchain works, all the kind of like miners and full nodes come to consensus on the state of that chain at any given period of time. And because it's a shared state, you can kind of like do things like DeFi, right, where we have like money Legos that can kind of like build on top of each other and share the state between each other, or share the kind of information between each other. You can have things like dashboards like Zapper, for example, that can pull in all your positions from all the different apps. Like, you just don't get that in kind of like the Web 2 world, because there's not a concept of a shared state there, right? Like, every app has its own kind of like database that it pulls from to display you the information. For example, your bank will have its own kind of like database that it won't, openly share with anyone. It'll have an API where kind of like developers can tap into for certain things, but most things are not shared for obvious reasons, right? Because of privacy and things like that. But with Ethereum, like, as we progress through, we'll be able to kind of like have the open, shared, public kind of like ledger and shared state with privacy built in too, because of things like ZK tech and stuff like that. But essentially, this is Ethereum's kind of like, or I guess blockchains, smart contract chains, kind of like killer app or killer use case is that shared state. Now, because of that, essentially, you can build whatever you want on top of that. You can tap into the same information that anyone in the world can tap into, and everyone has the same objective view of it, because that's just the way blockchains work. So if you were to build a metaverse on top of Ethereum, like maybe not Ethereum layer 1, because that'd be pretty expensive, but Ethereum layer 2, where you just stored the state of that metaverse on a layer 2 network, and then you kind of like build out all your, if you're building like a virtual world or a video game or something, where you have the game assets kind of like off-chain, but you have the important information, the important state on-chain that everyone can kind of view, then, something really, really exciting happens from there. We basically have like a decentralized metaverse because of the fact that you're kind of using a layer 2 based on Ethereum. And, I wrote about this in the newsletter today as well, but I was kind of thinking, well, do we really need a decentralized metaverse, or would a centralized one be just fine? And I don't think so. I don't think so at all, because let me put it to you this way. Wouldn't it be incredibly dystopian if we kind of like got to a place where we had like this one shared world, where hundreds of millions of people came to kind of like interact and do things and kind of like, live essentially in this metaverse? If it was owned by a kind of like centralized operator or a set of centralized operators, and they controlled the shared state, then that would be very bad, because at a moment's notice, they could kind of delete you out of the metaverse, right? They could just remove your state, your presence, and you wouldn't be able to do anything about that because it's a centralized service. You could probably go join some other metaverse or something like that, but maybe it's not the one that you want to be in, because all your friends are on the one that you just got banned from, or the one you just got deleted from, right? Like, it's very dystopian. But then you kind of like look at something like a truly decentralized metaverse where essentially that can't happen, right? Like, you can't just be kind of like deleted out of existence. And I think that for a kind of like true metaverse to work long term, it needs to be built on incredibly neutral, truly decentralized infrastructure. At least the state needs to be stored there. And that's why I think Ethereum is obviously perfectly positioned for that. But Ethereum is also the metaverse. Like, it all comes back to that for me. I mean, it's funny because like if you look at the Ethereum blockchain as a kind of game, it has like an inventory, which is your Ethereum wallet, or kind of like bag slots, which is your Ethereum wallet. It has a native currency, which is ETH, right? And then like in your bags, you can store items like NFTs and things like that. So really, I mean, the Ethereum blockchain is kind of like a game. People refer to crypto and DeFi and things as a game as well. So it's not a new kind of like comparison there. But when you really kind of like think about it, it's pretty cool. It's just the visual aspect is kind of lacking. But we do have tools that visualize it. As I mentioned, Zappa is like a dashboard that you can visualize things in. The NFT JPEGs obviously visualize things, but it's not like we have a game world yet that we can kind of like do stuff in. There are like little projects here and there trying to do stuff, but nothing as kind of like a massive shared, world that everyone kind of like warps into with virtual reality or anything like that, and that's kind of like played by hundreds of millions of people around the world. That would be really cool. Nothing, you're probably thinking of Ready Player One right now. That's a pretty perfect example of a shared world, but that was like very centralized, right? There was like one corporation that owned everything, and that corporation exercised their power, and it was pretty dystopian. So I do hope that we can kind of like create this awesome shared decentralized metaverse with Ethereum rather than and being built on Ethereum with its shared state, rather than building something totally centralized or adopting something centralized like what I'm sure Facebook has in store for the metaverse. So yeah, just some additional thoughts after running through the metaverse yesterday as well. So, Ethereum L2s, I'm going to spend, I think, most of this kind of review talking about L2s today, but you guys know I love L2s. I talk about it all the time, and I put out this tweet where I basically said, Ethereum L2s are finally having their moment, and it's still only early days. The explosive growth that all of these L2s are about to experience is going to be intense. I really do feel the sentiment shifting lately. Ethereum is scaling, and the world is waking up to this fact. And I mean, it really is. Like, the sentiment over the last few weeks has been pretty crazy to see shift, even without these layer 2s having done tokens yet. There's more projects going live on them. People have more stuff to do. They're realizing that, okay, they're not the cheapest thing in the world, but they're still giving you the Ethereum experience that you know and love. And it's much, much cheaper than layer 1. There's easier onboarding tools. There's easy ways to bridge in and out. As I said, guys, like once the infrastructure is in place and once the apps start going onto these things, it just snowballs from there. And I think that we're, as I said, still only early days, and the explosive growth is yet to come. Like I could see L2s reaching $100 billion in TVL, right, collectively in aggregate, within a year. I mean, if they play their cards right, I can see that happen within a year, especially with token incentives and things like that. And that's exactly what happened with DeFi, actually. DeFi was like a few $1 billion in TVL, and then DeFi Summer happened, and we suddenly went to $100 billion within a year, I think it was. So pretty crazy to compare to compare and contrast how that could happen again with L2s. We can have a true L2 season, and I think it's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. And I think the infrastructure, as it keeps getting rolled out and built out, is going to help a lot with that. So obviously, I'm super excited for it. I've been playing around with them more lately. I think the L2s also offer more opportunity in terms of kind of newer projects deploying there, the native projects, where you can be early to them, kind of like buy the token early and participate in the upside and do it cheaply as well. Because this is what happened when I guess like DeFi Summer kicked off on Ethereum layer 1, is that you had all this opportunity and you didn't mind paying the high fees because there was so much opportunity to be had. But now, since pretty much every other L1 has like replicated this playbook, it became kind of like less and less alpha over time, and it became kind of like less and less fun as well. But on L2s, I mean, you get fast transactions, you get very cheap transactions, and you get a lot of projects coming out now that haven't even been deployed to L1. So it's really exciting again. And I've been speaking to a lot of my friends, a lot of people that obviously did DeFi Summer with me, and they feel the same thing. So I'm super excited for all of that, and I guess like I'm really excited to see what apps get deployed to L2 that aren't possible in L1 as well, because that is the kind of stuff that really excites me about the L2s. Not just the kind of obviously cheap fees and fast transactions are awesome, but the kind of like enabling new use cases, which is super exciting as well. And speaking of kind of like L2s taking off, David Mihal put out a tweet yesterday that Binance suspended Arbitrum withdrawals less than a week after first enabled because their hot wallet got drained. So you can see here that their hot wallet only has about 5 ETH left in it after getting drained, and not because they got hacked or anything, but because people were withdrawing from Binance to Arbitrum. So I think there was like a few thousand ETH in there when they first started off. So I don't know if they've re-enabled it, because this was about 24 hours ago now, I think. But yeah, that's pretty crazy, right? When you kind of like look at this and think about it. So, yeah, really cool to see that there's the demand there, right? And this is going to signal to other centralized exchanges that the demand is there. The users want this product. Like, let them kind of like, onboard it, let them use it, let them kind of like play around with it, and you'll get like a lot of users by doing this. So I'm sure other ones are going to follow along soon. But pretty exciting to see that the adoption is actually there for Arbitrum, right? All right, so I spoke about this, I think a few days ago, this BitDAO kind of proposal for a $200 million ZK Sync fund. Now, this proposal is actually live now and is officially live, so you can actually go visit this at this link here that'll be linked in the YouTube description below, but if this passes, there'll be $200 million worth of BIT tokens allocated to growing out the ZK Sync ecosystem, which is super exciting, obviously, right? Like, this is going to put them on par with some of the L1 kind of like war chests out there in terms of like incentives for getting developers and users on board and all that sort of stuff. And we've already seen like a lot of these L2 teams kind of raise money too. So they've got like a lot of money to splurge there. And obviously when they do tokens, they're going to have treasuries that they can tap into as well and give out like token rewards for various things. So I'm super excited for these. $200 million, it's a lot of money, right? That's going to go very, very far. And I think the ZK Sync ecosystem is very exciting too. They're obviously being slower to grow right now than the Arbitrum and Optimism ones because they don't have their kind of like proper network out yet, but they've still been growing, right? Like I've used Zigzag Exchange on there, which is really, really awesome to use. I've obviously done donations with Gitcoin. So it's a smooth experience. I like that I don't have to change my RPC. That's really cool that I can just kind of like stay on the same RPC that I'm using and kind of like just sign messages and interact with it on layer 2 there. So very, very cool. I'm going to assume that this is going to pass, right? Like I don't think there's going to be any rejection here. And it's really cool to see BitDAO basically putting a lot of money towards the ZK Sync ecosystem here. So still on the topic of L2s, the Polygon Zero Twitter account today shared a blog post called ZK and the Future of Ethereum Scaling, which is basically going through obviously ZK rollups and future of Ethereum scaling and things like that. If this wants to load, yes, okay, it's loaded here. So yeah, as I said, it's titled ZK and the Future of Ethereum Scaling. It was published yesterday, and it basically goes through ZK rollups versus optimistic rollups, the state of ZKs, kind of like how how attacks work and scalability advantages, capital efficiency, all that good stuff. Highly recommend giving this a read. That's why I'm bringing it up, of course. I think, in general, the best thing you can do right now, especially when the markets are quiet, do as much research on L2s as possible because, as I said, the opportunity is there. All the opportunities are going to be there from now on, I believe. I think L1... there's probably still going to be some stuff on L1, especially NFTs. People seem to love to do NFT minting on L1, and it's still pretty lucrative. But I think L2s are going to have more and more opportunity as time goes on. So the quicker you get on there, the earlier you can be to a lot of these protocols, and the potential to make a return is a lot higher. But on top of that, I would suggest learning a lot about these different protocols and how they all work and stuff so you can make the right bets as well. Because as I've said before on the refill, I expect there to be plenty of L2s coming out, whether they be kind of like novel constructions or forks of existing L2 infrastructure, and placing the right bets is going to be very important there. So definitely go give this a read. And you can just Google for more and more kind of reads on this sort of stuff. There's plenty of information out there on this at this point. And of course, I'm going to keep talking about it as well. So you've got me to help educate you as well. So Optimism published a new repo today, or at least shared a new repo today on GitHub. For the developers out there, you'll know what this is, but it's basically called the Cannon, or the Cannon, which is an on-chain interactive dispute engine implementing EVM equivalent fault proofs. So I guess in plain English, this is basically, from what I understand it, Optimism's implementation of fraud proofs, which is how optimistic rollups secure themselves. So a quick refresher here, optimistic rollups work by basically taking an optimistic approach to transaction validity, that basically saying, okay, we assume that everything is valid and there's no fraud happening on the optimistic rollup construction, but to make sure that this is true, we give people 7 days to dispute anything that happens on the rollup, and if they do that, they kind of play a game called called I can't remember exactly what the game was called. There was a specific name for it, but essentially, if you can kind of submit like a fraud proof and say, okay, well, here's proof that this happened and it wasn't supposed to happen. This is actually fraud. Then you can basically kind of like dispute that, and you can earn kind of like some reward from a bonding mechanism and all that sorts of stuff. So that's not implemented in Optimism right now. Arbitrum does have it implemented, but Optimism doesn't, and they've come under kind of like criticism for not having it implemented. So this is really cool that they've got a repo here and they're building it out now, but I'm not sure how long this is going to take. This is another risk, by the way, of using Optimism, that they don't have fraud proofs enabled, which means that you're just basically trusting that everything is going well. So that's obviously a risk, but cool to see them publish this repo. And, I've seen them get a lot more aggressive on Twitter lately as well, the Optimism Twitter account here. Some things I like, some things I'm a bit like, They're kind of like poking fun at Arbitrum lately, which is, I mean, it is what it is, but I think the competition is going to really, really heat up in the L2 space, and you're going to see some toxicity between L2 communities, especially when these things do tokens. So do expect that. But I think competition is good as long as it's healthy competition. There's obviously a lot of unhealthy competition that can happen that is not something that we obviously want to see. But at the end of the day, especially when tokens are involved, people get very passionate. Let's put it that way about things. But yeah, if you're a developer and if you're interested in fraud-proof related things, definitely go check out this repo from Optimism. So speaking of, if you're a developer, Spruce basically teased today on Twitter that the sign-in with Ethereum developer portal is coming soon. So they're putting together the basics for launch, but they asked what else people would like to see covered to enable sign-in with Ethereum. Now, I've talked about sign-in with Ethereum a lot before and how they're trying to basically become ubiquitous across not just kind of like the Web 3, but across like Web 2 as well. And basically creating tools to easily integrate kind of like a sign in with Ethereum button where you could literally use your Ethereum wallet to sign into a lot of kind of like the existing apps that you sign into using Gmail or using Facebook or using Twitter, right? The Web 2 apps. I think that's obviously super cool. So the fact that this developer portal is coming soon is going to make that a lot easier as well for people. The sign in with Ethereum crew are awesome. They've been doing this for quite a while. They're working very closely with things like ENS as well, and for like on-chain identity and stuff like that too. So if you're a developer, keep an eye out for this developer portal. Go follow the Spruce Twitter account here for this. And just a little bit of background, Spruce is the company building the sign-in with Ethereum standard, or at least kind of like one of them. I'm pretty sure they're spearheading it here. So if you haven't heard of Spruce before, that's who they are. But you've definitely heard of sign-in with Ethereum before. No need for me to kind of go into detail there, but very, very cool to see this coming soon. So Hayden from Uniswap put out a tweet yesterday, I think it was, or maybe earlier today, where he said, the Uniswap protocol is currently king of ETHUSD spot trading, comparing ETHUSD plus ETHUSDC plus ETHUSDT plus ETHDAI 24-hour volumes across Uniswap and centralized exchanges. So you can see here that Uniswap is doing $1.25 billion of 24-hour ETHUSD spot trading volumes, Binance is doing $1 billion, Coinbase is doing $0.5 billion, and FTX is doing $0.43 billion. And this is with high gas fees, and then Hayden goes on to say, imagine what happens when we scale. I think this isn't just across layer 1 Uniswap though. I think this is across layer 2 as well. I don't know if kind of like Hayden commented that here somewhere, but most of this kind of like volume would be on layer 1 anyway. But this is insane, right? Like I remember back in 2019, where DeFi was still like a niche thing, there were people kind of doubting DeFi. They're like, this is never going to take off. This doesn't make any sense. And they were in particular doubting the AMM model, right? The automated market maker model, saying that, who wants to LP? There's impermanent loss. Like retail users don't know what they're doing. Like, who wants to just be a passive LP? LP being liquidity provider. And all of that FUD was put to bed through 2020, specifically because Uniswap obviously exploded in trading volumes because of DeFi summer, and people were just LPing and being like, okay, well, I can LP for any token that I hold. Like, why am I just holding it in my wallet? I'm going to provide liquidity for it. And, I understand the trade-off here with kind of like impermanent loss, but a lot of these things have kind of like farming opportunities as well, where you can earn token rewards to offset that. So, but like, I think the real standout winner is kind of like the ETHUSD spot trading with stablecoins, because obviously stablecoins took off during DeFi summer as well. So very, very cool to see that Uniswap is still beating centralized exchanges for 24-hour volumes. It's pretty crazy when you think about it, right? It's also crazy that the Uni token. I don't hold any of the Uni token. I'm not saying to go buy the Uni token, but you can compare the Uni token's value to something like Coinbase, and it's pretty wild that there's still a pretty big gap there. But I think obviously when you look at it, Coinbase generates actual revenue for the company, whereas Uniswap doesn't generate any revenue for anyone except liquidity providers right now because there's no fee take enabled on for uni holders or even for like the treasurer or anything like that. So it kind of makes sense, but there is kind of like a pretty big gap there. And Uniswap's growth potential is huge from here. I mean, I'm sure they're working on V4, which is probably going to be just as amazing as V3 was. They've just started their kind of like L2 scaling journey with Arbitrum Optimism, and then obviously the Polygon POS chain as well. And it's just going to grow from here, I think. I think Uniswap's going to be doing tens of billions of dollars of ETH USD spot trading volumes eventually. But, this is just one pair. Like, obviously, Uniswap does volumes for pretty much like any pair you can think of has a Uniswap pool, especially, and AMMs are really good for the long tail of assets, meaning the, there's obviously like the top 10 assets that account for most of the volume, but then there's like the long tail, which is like the thousands of other assets out there that people speculate on. So very, very cool to see this from Uniswap. And as I said, I expect this growth to only continue from here. So Nick from the ENS team today announced the first version of the ENS toolkit for supporting off-chain resolution of ENS names. And he goes on to describe it and saying, with these tools, developers can build infrastructure that allows hosting domains and subdomains off-chain, eliminating gas fees for record updates and subdomain creation. These names will resolve seamlessly in Web3 libraries with support that support ENS's new resolution standard. Support in Ethers is coming soon, and we're working on pull requests for other popular Web3 libraries. So obviously, this is a big deal for developers, but also a big deal for all of us that have to, pay gas fees for updating records if we want to update our kind of like ENS records here. So very, very cool to see these. If you want to read more, dive deeper into this, you can go to this blog post here, discuss.ens.domains on their forum. I'll link this in the YouTube description and kind of like find a detailed breakdown here, which is really, really cool. Now, ENS, I mean, it's funny, since they kind of like issued their tokens, started their kind of like DAO and everything, I've seen so much more interest in ENS than I've ever had before. And it's kind of crazy because for the longest time, the people who had .eth in their kind of like Twitter name, they were kind of laughed at by a lot of people saying, oh, the .eths, haha, they're kind of like cringe, blah, 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 especially during like 2019 and 2020. And now, I mean, there's leaderboards for the people with .eth names. Like everyone has their .eth name. It's like a badge of honor that you have a .eth name, especially if you've got like a rare one, like Nick.eth, for example. I mean, no other Nick in the world can have Nick.eth, and Nick Johnson from the ENS team has it here. My co-founder of ETHUB, Eric, there's probably, tons of Erics in the world, but like he has Eric.eth. I unfortunately don't have Anthony.eth. I obviously have Sassel.eth, but that's good enough for me. I don't need Anthony.eth. But again, like, having these kind of like things and being able to prove that you have it too, because you can sign a message from the address that you've got your ENS tied to, is pretty cool. And I think like once the metaverse stuff, I guess like takes off as well, in terms of like the visual kind of like aspect of it, that's going to be very important. And now that I think about it though, you already have kind of like a character name, right? Because your Ethereum wallet is kind of like your inventory, but like your character name is kind of like your ENS name. So, you already have that. You can basically port that into any metaverse game that comes out, and I can have like my Sassel.eth character, and that's like totally unique. And I can actually, because of the shared state, I can port that into different kind of like places. And then obviously couple it with sign in with Ethereum, where I can port my whole on-chain identity and my on-chain profile to any Web 2 or Web 3 app out there, which is only made possible by that shared state, by that kind of like metaverse aspect of Ethereum there, which I think is really, really cool. And actually, one thing that I didn't touch on when I was talking about at the start about Ethereum being the metaverse and shared state and all that sort of stuff is the cost to attack. Now, if you think of Ethereum as kind of like I don't know, like I've called it like an empire before, but some people didn't like that frame. But if you think of Ethereum as kind of like a massive online global digital nation, and you think about what's protecting that digital nation from attack, well, right now it's proof of work miners, right? Like the hash rate's really, really high because Ethereum is worth a lot, and it's obviously very profitable to mine ETH. But then post merge, we're going to have ETH as a proof of stake network where validators are protecting the network, and the stake is protecting it, and we have true finality as well. There's going to be like tens of billions of dollars, and as ETH's price increases, hundreds of billions of dollars at stake securing the network, and also finalizing the network, and that's kind of like going to be the cost to attack. And if you do attack, you run the risk of getting slashed as well, which is just like not, obviously not good, because you're going to lose a lot of your ETH if you try to attack the network. So that's another reason why a metaverse built on top of decentralized infrastructure is critically important, because the cost to attack is so high. Whereas a centralized service, the cost of attack is pretty low, right? Especially if you're able to kind of like socially engineer an attack as well of the network, and kind of like get admin credentials and things like that, could be pretty bad, right? So that's another aspect that I think is kind of like worth thinking about too, is the cost to attack. But yeah, that's I guess like really interesting to think about. But back on the ENS topic here, I think, I was just talking about how only one person can have like Nick.eth and one person can have like Eric.eth. And people may think, oh, well, isn't that going to be exclusionary? But at the end of the day, in Web 2, it was kind of the same thing for a lot of services, where on Twitter, for example, your Twitter handle, there's only one person that has like the at Nick, or kind of like at Eric or at Anthony. And people got around that, right? They just made up their own Twitter handles. They made up their own names. And a lot of people do that in virtual worlds already. Like if you have a character name that you're going for in a virtual world, like an online game like World of Warcraft, for example, you probably not going to use your real name, right? You're just going to use a name. And you're pretty much anonymous to everyone except Blizzard, the centralized company behind World of Warcraft. But in a true kind of like decentralized metaverse world, you can be anonymous to everyone, because all that's tying your identity to the character is your Ethereum address, and you can find your Ethereum address via kind of like Tornado Cash, even from a centralized exchange, and then no one's able to track you, and you can stay fully anonymous, which I think is really, really cool as well. But anyway, I think I've spoken about the metaverse enough today, so I'm going to end it there for today. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.